This is not the first time we've seen this story play out. Just as Tesla is about to succeed, the attacks and lies escalate. Yesterday, the Wall Street Journal published an article accusing the Tesla board of searching for a CEO to replace Elon Musk. Both Tesla and Elon immediately stated this is deliberately false, yet the Wall Street Journal still went ahead with it. So how important is Elon Musk to the future of Tesla's businesses and stock? We've got the bulls here with us today. We've got Jeff Lutz, also known as Mr. Incredible, the Rational Bull, Cern Basher, the Bot Bull, and Joe Bhakdi, the Pioneer Bull. Welcome, guys.
Hey, great to be with you, Herbert.
Great to be here.
It's good to be here, Herbert. Thank you.
All right. So let's start with the top topic of the news. Last night, we're going to talk about Elon and Tesla. The Wall Street Journal published this. They said Tesla board opened search for a CEO to succeed Elon Musk. Of course, later they say this happened a month ago. And immediately after they did this article, which they published last night, Tesla came out and said earlier today there was a media report erroneously claiming that the Tesla board had contacted recruitment firms to initiate a CEO search at the company. This is absolutely false, and this was communicated to the media before the report was published. The CEO of Tesla is Elon Musk, and the board is highly confident in his ability to continue executing on the exciting growth plan ahead. This is Robin Denholm, who is the chairwoman of Tesla. Elon himself replied also, "It is an extremely bad breach of ethics that the Wall Street Journal would publish a deliberately false article and fail to include an unequivocal denial beforehand by the Tesla board of directors." Let's start off with you, Jeff. What's going on here? The company and the product. I don't look at the quarterly stock movement.
A very realistic bull, questioning certain decisions.
The rational bull. I enjoy listening to bears.
Looking for the red flags. You're supposed to react.
The longer term opportunity for Tesla is like no other company that I've ever seen.
Yeah, it just reminds me of that meme where, there's two people, they're standing on some plank and they've both got a noose around their neck, and I think it's like on a pirate ship or something. It's like, oh, is this your first time here? And just for us in terms of following Tesla and following the Tesla name, it's like we see this stuff all the time. And it wasn't a surprise. I think we're well prepared for it as a community. The community got together, started dissecting, what's actually in this article. What are the statements? And all of a sudden you find out, oh, this was not a recent thing. This was past tense. And oh, well, this isn't how normally searches are conducted for the most consequential CEO on the planet. You don't normally go to the yellow pages and look up search firms and start having them throw out names of like, yeah, we think this person's kind of like Elon Musk. Like none of this seemed all kind of bizarre and weird, especially like my experience. I've done succession planning. There's nothing wrong with succession planning. I've been a part of succession planning. It's something that needs to be done, especially at the C levels of all corporations. That's a very healthy thing. There should be a succession plan, a ready now, a multi-year succession plan for Elon and quite frankly, all the staff members. That's a very healthy thing. So there's nothing wrong with that. Those are very private things. Those things should not be leaked. But if you heard about that there's an existence of a succession plan, there's nothing strange about that. What's strange about the article is the Wall Street Journal was informed that I guess they reached out to the company for comment, and the company said this is not true. And they can choose to run the article anyway. That's fine. I've even seen some people online, kind of talk through that. But to run the article and then to not include that we reached out to the company and the company said that this is false, I think, that's breaching certainly some form of ethical concerns with how these things should be handled. So I found that to be straight. It's almost ideological. And I posted today. I don't think people realize how many different groups on all sides of the spectrum are against Elon or Elon companies just because of what they are and how they operate. It's even in the conservative parties that have been anti-green movements, anti-electrification, all the way through certainly the Democrat Party, and then certainly the mainstream media who, and not only is Elon attacking, but there's no dollars coming from his companies to the mainstream media to run ads. So if you put all these things together, and we've heard the stories of like, oh, if there was just a PR team, they would get ahead of these things and they wouldn't get published. Or if they would, it would be, well, here you have the company responding and they still publish the article anyway, and they don't include the response from the company. So it was quickly dealt with. It was good to see Tesla, both the board chair and Elon, come out and speak to it, because I mean, there's a backdrop. This isn't all like, we were wronged and everything was, terrible. I mean, there is a backdrop that provided the recipe for something like this to be created. Obviously, there's a lot of noise for Tesla in Q1. There was even noise with the board and how, stocks are sold and so forth. And there's a story behind each one of these things. So it was kind of a perfect storm for some of this to happen. It's unfortunate. It shouldn't happen. And finally, it's almost, it's kind of otherworldly to think about the media coverage of Elon. There was a measurement put out. I guess he's getting 96% negative sentiment media coverage. That's almost impossible, especially as him as a person in terms of what he's doing. He's helping ALS patients communicate for the first time, people that had no mobility to communicate with brain implants, eventually the blind to be able to see, rockets that, boosters that land themselves and are reusable. All of his companies, the electrification movement really spurring that for the entire globe and being the only known profitable manufacturer. There's so many good things to write about, yet the sentiment is 96% negative. So it kind of, to me, positions how something like this could happen. You have an ideological media and they went ahead with something anyway. It's unfortunate, but I'm glad to see Tesla respond. I think going forward, I think there's critical things to address. Obviously, is compensation. Obviously, there's a shareholder meeting coming up. There's several things to vote on. So there's a culmination of governance events that have to happen, but it's nice to see the company situate this properly.
I agree with what you just said, where it's absolutely inexcusable for a large media outlet like this to not include when the company, in this case, the board of Tesla, actually said this is not true. They didn't even include that. They should have included that. Now, this has been happening, not just now, right? It's been happening for as long as we can think of Tesla as you're disrupting it. Cern, you've been following the company for quite a while. Here is, Elon himself. This is July of 2022. He said, the Wall Street Journal has run so many BS hit pieces on me and Tesla, I've lost count. It's embarrassing for them, frankly. They once wrote an article saying FBI was about to arrest me. So I called the FBI to ask what's up. And they said Wall Street Journal article was totally BS. Just more short seller fun. This is 2022. Cern, is this, I don't know. Why are they continue doing this for so many years and just keep doing it? Enemies.
Yeah, I mean, it's a war of words, right? You can create narratives in the media. The media is very powerful in helping people make up their minds about things, rightly or wrongly. And of course, over the years, a growing number of people have distrusted the media, and that's probably why X is doing so well. But it's just another example in a long line of many examples of the media, fabricating, telling lies, twisting the truth, whatever you want to call it. It's also interesting, Herbert, that the Murdoch family owns the Wall Street Journal, which is owned by Dow Jones Company, which is part of the News Corp media empire. And James Murdoch is on Tesla's board. Now, James is not involved in the Murdoch family media empire anymore. But there's kind of interesting connection there. But I think it's just likely that there are a lot of incumbents, right, that Elon is going after with all his various companies. Tesla, for sure, with oil and gas companies, the automakers. Tesla doesn't advertise in the same way these other companies do. They're long-term putting these other companies out of business, or at least materially hurting them. And so there's a lot of people that are upset about that and will fight back in any way that they can. And doing it through the media over time has proven, I think, to be pretty effective in putting false narratives out there. And sometimes some of them stick. And in this case, it's just causing a little bit of trouble for Tesla and forcing them to respond.
What do you guys think about what parts? It's like the entire article is wrong. Maybe there were some parts that are correct, like when it was during the height of Tesla hate and Elon Doge, that he should have come out and say that I'm going to leave Doge, and that maybe the board did ask him to do that. I can see that part being true. And he did. He actually did end up saying that. What's your thinking there, Joe?
Well, first of all, I think the level of unprofessionalism and breach of any kind of ethical standards here is pretty breathtaking. The fact that Tesla actually denied that right before the article, and they printed anyway, and they don't even mention that is really bad. But it's very important to see that the mainstream media, including the Wall Street Journal, they're really going down the path to hell, and they just keep deteriorating, and they're getting more and more desperate about it. And we see that across the board, right? When you see the loss of trust in the media is dramatic over the last 10 years because of things like that. I think it's very important to understand that Elon is at the intersection of two very important, like meta mechanics in the media that make him a target. Recently, because of Trump, right? Because we know there's a liberal bias, and in the Wall Street Journal, there's also a kind of a status quo bias. That's why Trump is also not their greatest friend. But on top of that political bias, Tesla has a specific problem. It's not just that Tesla doesn't advertise, but when you look at the biggest advertising spend, the biggest revenue shares of these companies is always pharma and automotive, right? Pharma, of course, by far the biggest, 25% roughly of these media, of the revenues of News Corporation and New York Times and all these guys, especially in TV, CNN and MSNBC, is pharma. That's why no one can say anything about pharma because they just pull the money and you're dead. And automotive is right behind that. It's the biggest spender next after pharma, and probably together with fast-moving consumer goods like Procter & Gamble. And that gives them tremendous power, right? If you get all your ads from GM and Ford and BMW and Volkswagen and Toyota, what happens if you would actually report and say, like, you know what? I drove the latest Model Y. We do a little review. It's the best car in the world. What happens to your Toyota ad account? Do you think they find that very funny? And GM and so on. So there is a direct financial incentive and pressure that is not small. We are talking, 15, 20% of your entire revenue as a company, as News Corp, as Wall Street Journal, and so on, comes from automotive. And that means they have enormous leverage. And that means the entire reporting we get is just a joke, right? It's a joke because there is a huge conflict of interest. I think people don't understand that fully, right? They think, oh, it's a great, it's the Wall Street Journal. I'm sure they do great reporting. It's like, no, they do crappy reporting because their job is to be a propaganda outlet for their advertising clients because that is their business model. So I think this is just another example. It's not that these journalists are unprofessional or anything like that. It's clear that the economic incentives around these companies are completely skewed. And Tesla is the disruptor that doesn't spend money. Everyone hates them who's an automotive company. We will later talk about Toyota and Waymo. So all these people don't like them, plus they're huge spenders, and I think that is really the problem. And it's very important to understand media is a business like everything else. They have customers, and the customers are their advertising clients, and certain industries just dominate and control the media just through cash. And here's the result, the outcome. And that has been the case since forever. That's why the media was always against Tesla.
Yeah. Follow the money. Always follow the money. So when this news came out, or not news, but this information came out, Wall Street Journal posted on X, said, hey, we got this article. Some people immediately said, actually, that's great. Elon should not be part of Tesla anymore. I'm glad he's finally out. And others freaked out, said, oh my gosh, what is going to do to the business, to the stock? What do you guys think about that?
I mean, my reaction, well, you're going to have anytime you put anything out in social media, you're going to get the extremes of absurdity. And that's fine. It's free speech. My response was, I didn't immediately come to, if it were true, that's why I preface it, if it were true, it's not the end of the world at all. If anything, if you look at all of Elon's businesses, there's a CEO or COO over each of those businesses handling the day-to-day operational tasks. Tesla has been a very unique and probably the most time-consuming of them. So I looked at him like, okay, well, if they bring, I didn't look at it as Elon's out and they're bringing somebody else in. That would never. This is Elon's company until he doesn't want it to be his company, and he's publicly talked about, being more of a chief product or chief innovation officer role, basically guiding the trajectory and roadmap of the company. That's what you actually want from him. By the way, is when I saw a lot of the analysts get concerned of like, is Elon unlocking the factory doors and locking them up at night? I was like, that's not actually how things work. You want your CEO driving strategy and driving the roadmap of the company of where are we going in 10 years. And now let's back that off into 5 years. And now let me make sure in a 2-year window, have I allowed my team, given them everything so they can execute tactically over the next 2 years. So that's what CEOs are supposed to do. So I wasn't taken aback at all. But then my second response was, well, this is the Wall Street Journal. It's probably false. It's probably FUD. And the third thing is, this is not how executive searches are typically handled, especially of this kind of. This is the most high-profile CEO in the world. You wouldn't just pawn this off and say, "Hey,
career builder."
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I did put the career builder post up. So anyway, I viewed it as like, I didn't view it as a zero-sum thing. I viewed it as, if they're looking to augment the team at Tesla, that's great. There's probably a lot of people they could promote, quite frankly, and that's been the history of Tesla. Is come on, be hungry, execute, work inside of the culture, be successful, and move up. And that's why you've seen people rapidly move up the chain, into director and VP roles. I would think that would be more of the line of succession that they would be doing. But if they added to the executive team, that wouldn't be the end of the day, in my opinion. Wouldn't be the end of the world.
It reminds me of the age-old battle between operations people and sales people. And the operations look at the sales stuff and say, we never see those guys. They're always out of the office. Bring them back in. We want to see them. Right. And it's the same thing with Elon. His role is not to be on the factory floor unless he absolutely needs to be because of some crisis that needs his attention. I actually like the idea that he is talking with leaders in Washington and frankly worldwide. I think that's a very important role for the CEO of Tesla. I actually want him to spend a lot of time in Washington because there's a lot of things coming down the pipe that our elected leaders need to be aware of. And who better to tell them about this stuff than Elon Musk?
What do you guys think about the timing? Just odd timing. A couple of perspectives. First perspective is we're literally about to launch Robotaxi in a month. We're about to build massive numbers of bots this year. And then at the same time, he is leaving Doge, and he actually was at that same day that this article came out, right? There was this, the Trump cabinet, he was there, and they publicly praised him. And this is a quick video here.
I've been treated unfairly, but the vast majority of people in this country really respect and appreciate you. And this whole room can say that very strongly. You've really been a tremendous help. You opened up a lot of eyes as to what could be done. And we just want to thank you very much. And, you're invited to stay as long as you want. At some point, I guess he wants to get back home to his cars and his... You've done an incredible job. $150 billion. Think of that.
Yeah. 160 now.
Yeah, 160. They said, it could have been more. And a lot of stuff is being worked on. That number could be doubled and even tripled. A lot of things are being worked on that we don't count yet because it's not quite there. But you've done a fantastic job, and we appreciate it very much, Elon.
Thank you. And it's also an honor to work with your incredible cabinet. I just like to say thank you, everyone. It's great to work with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So very, very clearly, he ended his, work with Doge. In the bulk, he still says, I'll still follow 2 days a week. But that was clear. That was the day. And then this article comes out. What do you guys think?
I think it's just FUD, and it's, they're not playing 4D chess at the Wall Street Journal. I think they just got the story and said, push it out. It's great. Everyone thinks, Tesla's in crisis. The Elon derangement syndrome people think, this is the end of Tesla. So it fits. I don't think there was a big strategy here. I think it's very tactical. And I think to Jeff's point, I actually also was very split on this rumor in the beginning, even though I felt it's BS. But I would have nothing against the Tesla CEO who's not Elon for the same reasons, because I think Tesla is so large at this point that the base administrative effort for the CEO just gets very large. You have to manage all these cars. Then now the Robotaxi and humanoids are actually also becoming kind of established in my mind, at least. Like, it's already pretty clear how this is going to go. So putting a little pressure away, like taking a pressure off Elon on the boring side, right? What about all this administrative stuff, optimizing the company and running it, so Elon can focus on the things that really matter, from politics, to Cern's point, to innovation, and to really pushing the boundaries. I think the key is not that Elon is CEO. The key is that he's in charge of the company at large and can make sure the future is being built. And I think part of building the future is not having to deal with the present too much. And I think that should be the job of the CEO. He does it with X. He does it with SpaceX. They have CEOs. It's not that he's not running X or not running SpaceX. And I think Neuralink also, there, I don't even know who the CEO is, but they're all CEOs in there. And it's not that Elon doesn't, focus on SpaceX, for example. So, I think Tesla is now so mature, and these new revenue streams also will mature very quickly, I think, that you need administrative managers on top of that. And I think also a CEO to some extent who can just manage the baseline so Elon can focus on the important things. So I'm all for it, which does not mean that Wall Street Journal is correct in its reporting. But I think strategically, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of thing happening in the next few years.
Yeah, I'm for it. I think at some point Elon has to pull his companies together in more of a holding company. That can be a whole other show, Herbert. But I will. The only thing I will differ on it, and I've said both things, which is I wouldn't be surprised if they do want to have kind of a data. Also, they don't actually need it, because Elon has mentored these 10 to 15 or 20 direct reports on his staff. He's mentored them for probably most of them for more than a decade. So they've grown up in his likeness in their corporate career. They know how he operates. They probably have a what would Elon do kind of thing on their staff of like, all right, I've got a challenge. Like, why would I bring this to Elon? Like, what would he actually do? And they probably self-manage 99.9% of the things themselves. This Tesla is not a new company. It's not a startup. They act like startups, but these are grizzled veterans that have basically scaled up an industry from nothing. Nobody builds a car the way that they build a car, and nobody has the software, the infrastructure, all this technology working together the way that they have it working together. So they're actually a very special group, and that's why it's going to be more difficult to, quite frankly, bring someone in from the outside cold. It would be kind of awkward. I would think they would do more of a promote from within. That was the other alarm bell that went off in my head. I'm like, well, I wouldn't be surprised. Succession planning is normal. At the same time, they would probably do the succession planning from within. So I wouldn't be surprised if the little bubbles that are filled in under Elon's name are people that are actually internal to the company. And it doesn't mean that they wouldn't be then going out to executive recruiters to maybe shore up other areas of the staff. That's fine. That happens all the time. But with Tesla, everything gets announced. Everything, the person that manages, the lunchroom, and the fact if that person leaves, that goes out, and there's an electric article literally the next day. And it's just kind of par for what we're seeing. So I think we've covered the bases.
Yeah. Timing wise too, I think that just the last point I want to make is it's just odd timing, right? He has said that he wants to have 25% voting control just in case, because robotics AI can make humanity positive or can make humanity really negative, and he wants to have some say in that. So he's not going to leave now, and we're 1 month away from Robotaxi, where the robots are coming. So let's move on to the next thing, which is a month from now, June, we're going to see Tesla launch their Robotaxi business. And we've got companies announcing partnerships. And we already know that Waymo and Uber is waiting on the lineup to launch in June. They're already in Austin, so they're going to go head to head. Well, now Waymo and Toyota And look at this. I mean, this is kind of how many people did you see this and send you a note saying Toyota's toast or Tesla's toast? Well, if you read a little closer, it says here, we've reached a preliminary agreement to explore a collaboration of autonomous driving. Basically, we're thinking that we might agree to set up a committee that we might then decide how we might then do a future. I mean, it's really nothing really here. Now, Omar did a good list. Here's all of the other partnerships Toyota has announced over the years. You got Uber in 2018, Aurora 2021, Pony in 2019, Baidu I mean, it's ridiculous. Maybe they partner with every single one of these guys for autonomous driving. And it's yet another thing. Who wants to start here, Cern or Joe?
Yeah, I think, there are two takeaways for me. The first one is, okay, just think about what we are talking about. We are talking about vehicle development of some dedicated robotaxi, because that's the only thing that would be necessary to actually make sense. And if you know anything about automotive development cycles, that's like a joke, right? We are launching in June, and Cybercab is coming in Q1 scaled production. So if you announce a partnership and then start thinking about it, when is this thing coming out, if it ever comes out? So we are talking 2029 or something. It's a little late, given that we launch in 4 weeks with Tesla. And the next thing is, that I think it's, and Waymo is guilty of that too, because they're part of a big corporation of Google. There's also, I think, big corporate thinking that there is a CEO, not Elon, a CEO of Toyota, CEO of GM or Ford, and they have all these little things going on. And when they hear about a new technology like autonomy and robotaxi, here's exactly what's going on in the brain. It's like, oh, this is very interesting. There's a new thing. We should invest a little money so we can compete. Right? Okay, next. What else do we have to do? Oh, we have to switch to like a new accounting system. Let's also put some money against that. That's the big difference. Like for Tesla and for Elon, this was not a little side gig. It was betting the entire company on it. It was putting half of the R&D money into robotaxi and autonomy and building one of the world's largest supercomputers, Cortex, with 60,000 H100 equivalents. You don't do that as a little side gig where you announce a partnership with Toyota. So it's kind of these half-baked little attempts. And when you put that into dollar amounts and top management attention and R&D power and just draw some bar charts, I'm sure Cern can figure out how to quantify that ridiculous, comparison of these two. It's not even close, right? It's a tiny little thing for Toyota. And for Tesla, it's like all in, the entire company, top management focus, everything. And they started, 10 years before Toyota started. So once you quantify it, it's so ridiculous that I always have to laugh when I see this. And that, especially that the media then says, oh, now Tesla is toast because they will have 2 robotaxis with Toyota out in 2030. So I don't take it too seriously.
Yeah. So this is, we've got... this is what a Waymo car looks like. This guy's the ex-CEO of Waymo, and they had a war of words with Elon. Elon said Waymo needs Waymo money to succeed, right? Because he's referring to that the cost of a Waymo is so expensive that in order for them to scale, they need to do that. Waymo came out and said, hey, we're already doing 250,000 fully autonomous paid rides each and every week. We're already out there. But yeah, Cern, I mean, with all this cost for creating a car like this, they say, Waymo's position on this is that doesn't mean anything, because once you get down to cost per mile and extend it to 5 to 10 years out, it doesn't really matter how much more the car costs. What do you think, Cern?
Well, the cost does matter. It will matter at some point, not initially, but it will. But the biggest issue I think right now that Waymo is facing is their ability to scale. It appears that they will not be able to scale nearly as fast as Tesla will be able to scale. Now, Tesla, in theory, will be able to scale to the whole United States with the push of a button if they wanted to, if the regulatory framework was in place. Now, that may not be the case, and Tesla may not be ready to do that, but Tesla doesn't have the same limits on their ability to scale than Waymo does. And so I think that for me is the biggest factor. But ultimately, the cost per vehicle will matter a lot, because in a competitive market, right, it's going to come down to how you're able to operate and what the profits are relative to the cost. And with Waymo, there's a limit there with the cost of their vehicles, right, versus Tesla. Now, I take a little bit different opinion in terms of this announcement. I actually see it as a massive positive, but not for those companies. It's a massive positive in the sense that the media is talking about this, and the media is wrapping their minds around the idea of robotaxi. If it was just Tesla out there doing this, we either wouldn't hear a thing or it would be all negative articles. But I actually love the fact that the media generally is very positive about Waymo. And when anybody talks about autonomous vehicles, they seem to always mention Waymo. Even Jensen Huang yesterday, when he was talking about that in an interview, he mentioned Waymo and didn't mention Tesla. But I think that's ultimately good because it's getting people used to the idea of autonomous vehicles, and that's important.
And people also love a battle, right? So I think to Cern's point, people love if there's a battle or when there's a battle. And for us from an analytical point of view, it's also nice because you have two curves. You have the Waymo curve with 700 cars in 10 years. And then you have the Tesla curve with 0 cars in 10 years. And then 10 cars on day one. And then the race is on. Because then we will see, okay, what happens in week 2? Is it 20 cars or is it still 10? And then I'm pretty convinced you will see this little inflection point way sooner than people think. And suddenly you start with 0 and then with 10 and then with 100 and then with 700. And then these two lines cross after exactly 2 months. And then people can do the math. Okay, 10 years, 4 weeks. What happens next? And that's, I think, very interesting because that goes into, is this a sell the news event, blah, blah, blah. I think it's the total opposite. This is one of these events where this is the starting point and the race is on. And then we can track weekly what's happening. And if this actually pans out the way I think it could, this will drive the stocks absolutely to the moon over a longer period of time, because people will just panic. They will think, oh, I thought they will have 700 Tesla robotaxis now by 2035 because Waymo took 10 years. If they have it in 4 weeks, then I think a lot of things are going to happen. So for me, it's very exciting because the race is on. It's kind of a battle thing. And now we have really interesting metrics where the divergence of perception of reality clash. I mean, now comes the, we are living in our bubble. We think, oh, it's all awesome. The other side lives in their bubble, think this is ridiculous. They will fail. But now the guessing is over, and it will be very interesting. And that will lead to a massive effect on the stock one way or the other.
Yeah, the argument that the other side has, we have Gary Black, one of the analysts. You have Uber CEO. They're saying, hey, Uber is going to be in Austin, and we have a strategy where we're going to partner with as many autonomous vehicle companies out there, and we're going to be able to compete head to head with Tesla. And in fact, these analysts are saying, some of them like Gary saying, oh, yeah, no, the Uber is going to have many car companies and they're going to be able to price it at the same price that Tesla is going to offer it. And they're going to come out like within months, not years. So Uber says that that's our plan, right? We're going to partner with many. So you've got Uber partnering with Waymo. And here you've got a new partnership that was announced, Uber and May Mobility strategic partnership to scale autonomous vehicles. Arlington, Texas, identified as the first city. It's going to be on the Uber platform. This May Mobility, I don't know who these guys are. Autonomy as a service platform. Let's take a look a little closer to what they're saying. Initial launch by the end of 2025, right? And what is it? How many cars did they say here?
Thousands. They said thousands.
When is the thousands? Uber will offer customers the option of May Mobility AV on the Uber platform, qualifying trips, a fleet of American-made hybrid electric Toyota Sienna autonomous cars. That's what they've said there. Yeah. What do you guys think? I mean, is that this idea that Uber is going to have many and they're all going to be able to offer a competitor to Tesla?
I think it comes back to margin share versus market share. And you know, there's a corollary to the smartphone world on this, and a lot of people just don't realize, like, iPhones become ubiquitous with smartphone, that word, right? Just like Xerox and Kleenex and so forth. I talked about this in another episode, but if you look at it, I mean, there's 1.3 billion smartphones shipped, and Apple's 250 million of them. So it's a big number, but it's not all of them. There's a billion other smartphones are out there. But the key thing is margin share. Like, where is all the money made in smartphone, both hardware and app store? They dominate in it. Obviously, there's a couple of players behind it, and if you're in the top 5, you're probably doing okay. And I think that's kind of how this is going to play out, where there's going to be a winner take most, but there will be other people, there'll be other services. It's not going to be like there's just nobody's going to exist and it's just only going to be Teslas on the road. But now you have to look at the underlying structure of how the business case, the business is modeled, and how it's actually constructed. And if people actually sit down and they have a long form conversation and analysis of how the businesses are put together, you'd realize that ones that are put together with all these disparate vendors all over the place, and I'm going to buy from them, I'm going to buy from them, I'm going to buy that, I'm going to do that, we'll realize that every one of those vendors is going to want their cut. And it's when versus the vertically integrated model. And the vertically integrated model doesn't always win. There's reasons why it doesn't always win. If it never gets to scale, for example, it can be challenged. But it looks like Tesla is going to be able to get the scale, and they're going to be vertically integrated. So they're not going to be paying themselves a margin. They're going to design the best service in each of those individual verticals that are required to deliver this service, whether it's the inference solution, the hardware solution, the vehicle, whether it's actually the construction of the vehicle itself, whether it's actually the cleaning service that's involved. All of that's going to be done by Tesla, where everybody else is going to have to go out and shop for this stuff and shop for the best rates. And if there's scarcity, the costs go up. So it's going to be an interesting thing to watch. That's why I think it's going to be a winner take most. People are going to want to control the experience, and they're going to want to have the best experience and the most amount of control over that. And I think you're going to get that solution with Tesla. So I think it's going to be a winner take most. And that's why you have analysts and you have retail mostly talking past each other. And the other thing is, if you just take historical norms and historical TAMs, I think you're failing in this analysis, because when the cost structure becomes disrupted, the TAM meaningfully changes, and the whole conversation then changes. And I think that's where there's a lot of folks that are honestly talking past each other. And just again, just finally, this whole graphic I see going back and forth of, there's a company that's giving tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of rides, and Tesla's at 0. You could have done that same thing when 2004 to 2006 we were shipping the Razr phone. We shipped 160 million phones. By the way, there wasn't a lot of people, as many people today using phones as there are now, and they were at 0. We were at 160 million and they were at 0. And you could have said, like, we won this. But at the end of the day, there was a new paradigm formed, and a new business model was formed, and that's where the margin share went, and that's where a lot of the market share went. And so when the cheese gets moved, people don't know it. It's not as obvious, but when it's actually happening, the analysts that are really attuned to this will see it, they'll predict it, they'll understand it, they'll talk through it. And that's why I think there's only a very small percentage that actually do, and most of them actually don't see these things happening. Go back and read the articles from the introduction of the iPhone, or the introduction even of the smartphone. There's doubts that people were going to go into from standard phones to using these computers in the hand, and the cost structure, and everything was being doubted. And then we had the great financial crisis happen at the time. If you go back in time, there was a lot of people doubting what was going to happen, and very few people calling out the future cash flow potential of what was happening.
It's hard for me to understand. I'm doing my best to listen to these other voices. But like what you guys have pointed out is what we need to just reiterate, right? So number one, technology. All right, Tesla has their FSD, and some out there are going, yeah, that's just software. Anybody can copy that. And in fact, they'll copy it within 3 months. Okay, so that's step one. There's, well, of course, Waymo is showing that they could do this. So everybody goes, okay. Of course, there's lots of limitations, lots of concerns, but let's put that aside for now. Technology. Can other companies copy the technology? That's step one. But then they stop there. Then what about who's going to make the vehicles, right? We talked about this. You guys brought this up. Who's going to make those vehicles? How long will it take them to make the vehicles? If they start today, it will take 3 years for a company to plop on all of this new LiDAR thing to it to be able to match what Waymo's doing. So if Waymo's doing it, they only have 700 cars, 1,000 cars. They need to buy cars. I'd say they buy from Toyota. They will need to outfit those Toyotas. How long will that take? 3 years? 2 years? What will it be? And then all the other cars. So that's another one. And then the whole system, right? You were talking about that, Jeff. Like who's going to clean the cars? What app are they going to use? Okay, they're going to partner with Uber. Like all of these things. And then finally the business model. And that's where like you keep bringing up. It just breaks down for anyone else, honestly. So for somebody to say it's not only are going to offer as many options out there, but they're going to be priced equally to what Tesla's doing. How is that possible when you have to pay NVIDIA for the chips, you have to pay Uber for the app, you have to pay somebody else to do the cleaning of your system? What about you supercharging your things, and then the automakers? You have to pay, Waymo has to pay the automakers, or they, like. I don't understand. And by the way, that's the one thing I keep asking is when Waymo partners with an automaker, I want to know who's paying for it. It's actually Waymo buying cars from the automaker. I want to hear one day an automaker saying, hey, I'll pay you, Waymo, to outfit my cars, and I'll pay you for that. It's not what's going on here. It's Waymo going, hey, I need 300 cars. Let me buy this time Toyotas. That's what this is. So anyways, okay, Robotaxi launch is happening. Looks like it's happening in June. Anybody want to comment on what to expect and anything new that we learned since our show last week?
I mean, it's for me, there are these concrete things that you just laid out, Herbert, that are very important to look at all these things and how they compare. But there's also a meta perspective for me. I just draw Tesla's market cap and Tesla's, cash pile, and then I compare to the other companies. And then I multiply that with the management focus, attention, and spend on this problem. And if you do, and then compare to the others. And if you do that, there's just nothing left, right? I mean, first of all, Toyota is way smaller than Tesla in terms of cash piles and market cap. Now, what is the percent of Toyota's top level attention on making robotaxis happen? I don't know, like 1%, 2%. For Tesla, it's 50%. 50% is Optimus, 50% is that. And so when you have all these smart people doing all these things, it's just a logical function that there is roughly that level of advantage, right? It's a 50x, 100x advantage or more. And I'm always, sanity check myself. Am I just a fanboy and a tribal dude? No, because for example, I don't like OpenAI, but I think they're incredibly smart. And if you take OpenAI and compare them against xAI, this is a very serious competition, right? There's a top-notch team fully focused on OpenAI, on the LLM, spending enormous amounts of money. I don't think xAI has any very significant advantage. This is a cutthroat race, and OpenAI might be for them. So it's not just that I think Elon always wins. It depends who he's up against. But when it comes to these automakers and Waymo and Uber and Toyota and whoever, it just makes no sense. How are they going to win this, even remotely? It's not even close. It's like 100x differential of management power, attention, time, money. And so I just have to always remind myself on that, because when it comes to stocks and June and the leap of faith, is this actually going to work or not? I mean, I'm getting extremely bullish because we see so many indications from all directions, from the Tesla team, from the Tesla X account, from Elon, from the users, from YouTube, that this is just happening. And I find this very exciting, because if it's really happening, it depends exactly how quickly it's happening, but it could be an insane impact on the stock. So it's all, I'm getting, every day I get more bullish. And I try to be very critical, because it's about money, right? If we are wrong, and we are betting on the wrong options here. So I definitely see it in the realm of very possible that this just works. And if it works, it can scale very rapidly into 1,000+ cars in Austin.
Yeah, what was the stat? Yeah, just quickly, Cern, the stat, right, was it Waymo has 1,000 autonomous cars today, but Tesla can spit out a Model Y, which is an autonomous car every hour?
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
1,000 per hour, something like that, or. So
right, Jeff? What is it, Jeff? I heard it's
33 seconds. Yes. Yeah. I mean, the car's
One
rolling
car
off
every
the
30.
line. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy.
On multiple factories. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right. It's there's no company that has this large a percent of focus from the leadership, the CEO leadership team all the way down. It doesn't exist. And I'm surprised at the analysts that think that this is literally just going to like grow up from the ground like itself, like it's just going to happen. Like it's just going to happen.
Exactly.
You're going to go and literally open the catalog and say, I want that chip from NVIDIA. NVIDIA, send me that software. You ran all the simulations. I'm sure it works. I'll throw it in my car, even though my engineers don't have the experience of how do you what are these cameras? How do you calibrate these things? How did this whole system, the system engineering of putting this together into a vehicle, they don't have the reps. They're not doing this today. This is and part of the discovery of Tesla is like, why is it taking so long? Well, they had to go through and try and fail on multiple different levels to figure out it had to be end to end, and it had to work this way. And once they went end to end with V12 and they realized, okay, here's the CapEx investment we have to do. Here's the engineering team and effort that I need to do this. And what they found out is they made mostly the right decisions with the tech in the vehicles, and they're in good shape, starting really honestly with hardware 4, but even hardware 3. So I think that is being fundamentally missed. Is there's been a runway of years of work and years of strategic planning of what does the cost structure of this whole system need to be? What does the upfront capital? What is the cost of capital to launch this system and get it to breakaway velocity? That is a multi-year strategic planning exercise, and they've been executing. So if you ask me, well, what could go wrong? What could go wrong is the final execution. Are there issues with these final added features to get, I don't think that's going to be, I think Tesla's going to solve all the remaining features, whether it's emergency vehicles and specific zones. I think that's part of the localization effort that's going to need to occur in different countries. But Tesla's localization effort is a minuscule amount versus all the work that they did in their upfront foundation model.
Exactly.
And that's why they're adapting so quickly in all these new countries, and they're able to just plop the car down and it does most of the driving. So their localization effort is going to be like this. Everybody else's is going to be like this. They don't have the runway that Tesla has done up to this point, both in spend and in time and in engineers. Like this is all currency that's needed. And if you're an analyst and you're not taking stock and inventory of that currency that's needed to deliver this, I think you're missing a lot of this. I think we've tried to describe some of it here, but what could go wrong are there issues with getting to that 1 in 10,000 miles, 1 in 20,000? Are there issues on that execution on the way? The scaling laws say that we're on our way. The question is, where are we today and where will we be in June?
Just to build on what Jeff and Joe just said, the way I think about it is this whole narrative about the competition's coming. Competition's coming. For most companies, that's an issue because when they develop a product, they don't iterate that product and improve it very quickly. So most companies give time for the competition to come and catch up. The one thing I think that differentiates Tesla among almost any other company I've ever looked at is the speed at which they iterate. That's their competitive strength, among other things, right? I mean, manufacturing prowess, all the other things. But the number one thing, if I had to pick one, is that Tesla's ability to iterate and improve something. If they get something wrong on the Robotaxi unveil day, that first week, it's going to be fixed the next week. And the next week, it's going to be even better. And the next week, it's going to be even better. We've already seen that with software updates on our vehicles. First of all, how many other companies can even do over-the-air software updates? Not many. But the frequency with which my Tesla, my Model Y, my Cybertruck gets software updates, it's astonishing. And so that is Tesla's true competitive strength. So even if there are other companies that magically somehow catch up, which again, as Jeff said, is impossible because you've got to follow the trail and the trail is not there. Even if they could, Tesla would be pulling away from them very quickly because they just iterate that much faster. That for me is the number one thing. So, we're all excited about the Robotaxi unveil in Austin in June. We should be. My expectations actually, frankly, are low, and that's fine, but I think they will quickly improve that service and product. And that, I think, is going to be pretty incredible to watch.
It'd be interesting too, Cern, does the Robotaxi launch then apply visibility back to FSD, which quite frankly has very low awareness. I would have to imagine greater than 99.5% people in the US aren't even aware of it, or definitely in the world. And does Tesla having this Robotaxi service now point back, oh, by the way, if you buy one of these cars, it has all this stuff inside of it already, and then they release unsupervised for people like us who bought and own vehicles and have FSD. Well, what does that do then? Does that whole thing start taking off?
That's right.
There's Tesla still has to execute.
Yeah.
That's, by the way, also underrated, vastly underrated for the stock, that we are all staring at Robotaxi, but to Jeff's point, what about FSD? Maybe the take rate goes up like crazy, and everyone forgot about the affordable models, right? I mean, now it's completely confirmed. It's leaking in China that this thing launches. That's actually super cheap. They talk 20 to 23,000 or 26 to 28,000, which would be both revolutionary for demand and everything. That's just happening, and everyone's like, yeah, whatever, it's happening. Well, we know what that means, right? You triple or quadruple the TAM, like immediately in May. It says boom. So what does that do? So I think we have all these additional huge things flowing into the more boring base business model, right? FSD take rates, cheaper Model Ys, but this beefs up the stock like crazy, in my opinion. Plus, we have the option, the call option, that Robotaxi just takes off at some point, maybe sooner than later. So I'm, as a shareholder, I think we are like not pricing that in. We are still underperforming, even with the beta of Tesla, the NASDAQ, right? NASDAQ is down 9% year to date, and Tesla is still down 27% or something. It should be 20%. So I think I'm getting very greedy with the stock right now because of all these, confluences.
Yeah, I don't think people are talking about, well, first off, it's actually the opposite. The Q1 results, everybody's obsessing about bending metal and shipping cars. But it's all been rear view mirror. It's not looking ahead. And what's the landscape looking ahead? Well, this very large auto market in the US is now going to be tariffed, and it's going to go under protectionism like there's in India, and protectionism like there's in other countries. And there's going to be a significant, all the mid to low cost vehicles were actually being built on the outside of the country. And now you can't just move final assembly here. The economics don't work. You can't move from $6 an hour high labor content assembly and just cut and paste that in the US at $50 an hour. It doesn't work. Your unit economics blow up. So what happens to supply of those vehicles? What happens to the number of those models available? They both go down. Tesla is increasing. Tesla is doing the antithesis of this by introducing these lower cost vehicles and variants. They're going to be introducing more models. They've gone over the tariff threshold in terms of their localization. This wasn't something that happened overnight. This was 10 years in the making in how they developed their products and designed their supply chain. So there's this whole confluence happening, but you hear none of the analysts actually talking about they're going to have more supply and potentially more market demand awareness and availability of their product, while others, if you look at the top 10 EVs, 4 of the top 10 that are not Teslas, they're made outside of the US. What happens to those with a 25% tariff? Where does that volume go? Do people just not buy them? or there's clearly going to be, it's not going to be 100% going over the Tesla, but you would clearly have to forecast some sort of uplift. But what everybody's ready to forecast is brand damage. Everybody has that forecast ready to go and rolled out, but nobody has the forecast that says their businesses get obliterated with tariffs. Their businesses are in trouble. They cannot redesign a car that quickly. If you look at Mary Barr's her body language and what she actually said this morning, and when she was interviewed, it was, hey, look, this is 20, 30 years of supply chain development that we're basically being asked to transform overnight. It ain't going to happen. So what's actually going on is you're going to see models paused. You're going to see production stopped. You've already seen that. Land Rover, Audi, Jaguar, multiple different cars. Volvo's going to, that's happening. They're just going to be slow with the announcements. They're slow rolling the announcements. And the reason is there's been a lot of let-ups in tariffs. There's been a lot of relief out there. And if they come out there and they're too quick to say, hey, we're stopping this, we're doing that, these tariffs are really hurting our business, and all of a sudden the president says, hey, I'm going to actually apply some relief, then they're going to be on the wrong side of the administration. So there's a lot of poker face, a lot of poker hands being played. But right now, if you were to analyze all these businesses on their face, most of legacy auto in the US is in trouble, and that's a big market for them.
Yeah. So so let's cover the auto tariffs, because it has changed recently, and you, Jeff, explain this more. Same time, we're about to launch Tesla, these more affordable models in all factories. Wherever we're making Model Ys, they're going to come out, and so this is going to change the game immediately. So, Jeff, here's what we know happened this week. You had President Trump sign an executive order, and he's relieving a little bit what he initially slapped on the tariffs. Now, as you just said, imported vehicles into the United States, there's still at least 25% taxes. So, as you mentioned, the top 2, 3, 4 car companies, EV sales that are not Tesla, they are still going to get taxed. These are the GMs and the Fords. Yep. Same time, though, they've relieved a little bit for the tariffs on imported auto parts for 2 years. And if you are a car maker that have 85% domestic content, there's zero auto tariffs for the 85% domestic content. This is going to directly benefit Tesla. It's known for being the most American-made car. And let's take a look at this list here. I think we just covered this here. So you had this post, Jeff. Jeff, you said 95% of Tesla's U.S. sales will effectively be tariff-free. So if you look at this list, you see here Tesla Model 3, Model Y, anything that's over 85% tariff-free, right? And then the others, there's some going to be some tariff attached to it, correct? And then you can see Ford here, Honda, Jeep. These guys may not, but all of a sudden, everybody else basically is going to be tariffed at some point. It's basically the point here.
Yeah. So there's relief. If you're doing final assembly in the US, you're going to have some amount of tariff relief. And if you're over the 85% threshold, you're essentially going to be zero tariffs, because what's going to happen is you're going to pay the input cost for the parts coming in under tariff. You're going to still pay that to the Customs and Border. But when you actually sell the vehicle, there's going to be a rebate. It's for 1 year. I think it's over 3%. It's on the MSRP of the vehicle. And then it comes down in the second year, and it expires in, I think, April of 2026 or 7. I think it's a 2-year deal. So I wrote an article about this February 1st. As soon as the auto tariffs were announced, I'm like, this is going to be blood in the streets for legacy auto if they do the final assembly and the component tariffs together. Blood in the streets. There's no way that these businesses can function like this. And then the tariffs were put on and off. And then finally it was like, we're getting to the brink. And then they put them both on. And then they said, okay, there's a USMCA exemption. And now there's going to be, as the president described it, some relief and destacking. This was my most recent article a couple of weeks ago. I couldn't believe the way the tariffs were announced, which was, even if you had your final assembly, we're going to stack tariffs on all your inputs, on steel. Aluminum, components coming from abroad. They're all tariff. We're like, hey, you're asking me to untie this knot with my hands tied behind my back and it's just not going to work. So this is some relief on the destacking, and this is some relief on basically it's the right message to automakers, which is if you drive up your US content, we're going to make you whole. There's going to be a bit of a cash issue. If you're Tesla, you're okay. They have a very short supply network. They have very fast assembly times we were just talking about in the factory. It doesn't take long for them to build a car. So they're going to have the cash outflow to pay the tariff, to pay the additional cash for the tariff. But that's going to get relieved as soon as they sell the car. So if you have low channel inventory, short supply chain network, and you have if you have localized content, this takes years to do, and most companies can't do it. You're going to be in pretty good shape. Ford, I think, is going to be in actually pretty good shape, although they have a lot of channel inventory, but I think they're going to be okay. GM, Stellantis, in terms of, US or US localized, because there's a lot of different entities of Stellantis that are former US companies, they're in a lot of trouble. They have about 50% of their final assemblies on the outside of the US. And if you look at it on a content basis, it's more like 70% is outside of the US. And then you look at the traditional Porsche, Audi, Volvo, and so forth. Even though some of them have final assembly plants, most of their content's coming from outside of the US. These companies, with these tariffs, even though it was touted as kind of relief, these companies are in serious trouble with the current tariff structure. In fact, GM guided this morning. They took their EBIT.
They did not guide, isn't it? They pushed off the guidance for a whole year.
Well, they did. They when they had their earnings announcement on Tuesday, you're right, they did not guide, and they said, well, we will release guidance and have our call on Thursday. And then when they did that, they took their EBIT guidance down 20%. The whole window down 20%. That's a huge number. They said tariffs are going to all in net are going to be $4 to $5 billion of impact. So there's this great transfer happening. It's interesting. Tesla does not have to do this transfer of money to the government to increase their car production, but these others have to pass through this gauntlet, and they're going to be transferring a lot of dollars to the government until they get to localization. But I think a lot of them won't make it.
That's what I also think. And it's when you actually just add up the numbers. We just saw the top 25 list, but that means most cars are not in the top 25. They're like way lower on the US content. And just do the math. 25% tariffs, $40,000 ASP, let's assume, 50% US content. So you're paying 25% on $20,000, right? So you're basically, your COGS for a $40,000 car go up $5,000. Or in other words, in relative terms, Tesla COGS go down. Imagine you're Tesla and you can suddenly lower your COGS relative to the other guys by $5,000 across the board versus basically nearly everyone. Like, what would that do? They would achieve complete domination, because the others, it doesn't even matter if they pass it on or not pass it on, if they eat it with, and have no margin or a negative margin. It doesn't matter. You're trapped. And if you know anything about the auto industry, if you go there and say, oh, by the way, I'm increasing your COGS by whatever, 25% or 20, whatever it is. I mean, you're dead. And this is exactly happening. And for all this talk about, oh, Elon is so dumb, he goes into politics, now he has brand damage and the Elon derangement syndrome is spreading. Well, guess what the outcome is? One of the outcomes of that is now that basically Tesla got a complete tariff exemption. That's the bottom line. Like, they don't pay any tariffs when you think about it. I mean, these 80%, they can wiggle it a little up to 85%. Whereas every competitor pays tariffs, and most competitors pay insane tariffs to this point. And just think about it. Like, this is a market, this is a battleground of where people compete, and margin is very important. You can't increase the price, then you're dead immediately because no one buys your car. You cannot eat the margin because you're already losing money on your EVs. And your other cars have super slim margins, so it's I think it's a huge devastation coming.
That's what I was going to say. If you see, the disadvantages for these car makers is stacking up, right? So at some point, it's like that's it. It's over. They can't do it. So number one, they're disadvantaged in auto tariffs. So you just pointed that out. Number two, they're disadvantaged because they can't make profits with electric vehicles, and they're still trying to sell their gas cars, and they're trying to, plug the hole with the EV hybrids, because there was an issue with range anxiety, but that range anxiety is no longer an issue for EVs. And so you got to move to EVs, but yet they're not doing that. They can't make money in EVs. And then we got FSD. So if Tesla starts showing that FSD is a real value, Summon, Banish, just, helping you drive, it's really advanced ADAS, safety, all these things. What's the answer for you as a car company? What is your ADAS? What is your FSD equivalent? So it's one thing that, they're partnering with Waymo for a Robotaxi service. It's another thing are you even going to exist creating cars if all of a sudden your competitors in China, what's happening in China? Every EV maker is adding on their version of FSD, their ADAS as free service. It's just expected now. It's like part of a sale there because they're all doing it. Eventually that's going to happen in the US here too. And you've got Tesla selling it with their version of ADAS, FSD. What are they going to do? What are the other guys going to do? How does that compete? They don't even have it. Let alone a Robotaxi competitor, but a, autonomous car capability is what I'm saying. So
what you're saying, Herbert, is how many nails in the coffin do we need?
Yeah.
It's going to be a metal coffin. It's just nails.
Yeah, and I think autonomy is the only one you really need, but there's, as you mentioned, many others.
If you put your black hat on and say, what could go wrong for Tesla? We talked about Robotaxi and execution, and there's going to be all these eyeballs on it, and you have a negative media. You have a media right now that's 96% negative on Elon and Tesla. So invariably they're going to point everything wrong. But what could go wrong? Where there could be execution issues. What could go wrong here in auto? We painted this scenario, which is like Teslas are, like as Joe said, are effectively going to be cheaper than everyone else based on how they designed their supply chain and how the tariff schedule ended up. What could go wrong? What could go wrong would be 2008, 2009, where the auto industry dipped, one year 30%, and then by the peak or the trough of the great financial crisis, it dipped 60% in terms of unit sales for a year in the U.S. That everybody would feel that to some extent. Tesla would be the tallest tentpole in that. I believe they would actually take even share in that, but they would feel it. So the consumer has to stay strong. If you look at the macro data, the consumer is strong. The actual data that's in the books, the consumer is strong. The surveys say not so much. So the question is are the surveys right or not? And can this administration, can this Fed keep consumer confidence up and rolling? That is going to be a key for all of this to me. For all of this to happen. And what's good is at least the Fed has a lot of tools, and the Treasury has a lot of tools that they could unleash if they had to in that situation. But hopefully we don't get into that.
My perspective is the consumer surveys are always wrong. They always reflect the anxiety of the day and not really what people are doing.
That's evident. I mean, it was funny. So these University of Michigan inflation surveys are up at 6% now, I think, for the following year. But if you went back to those surveys in 2021 and said, where was inflation going to be a year from now? They only had it at 3% and it got to 9%. So yeah, you're right. These surveys just tend to be wrong. It's a question of in what direction and by how much, and they're more of reflecting, current sentiment of the day. So consumer has to stay strong in all this, I think, is the other thing to kind of keep in mind for this Tesla advantage, for them to be able to grasp a hold of this and really come out ahead. The consumer has to stay strong.
And I don't know who did that. I think Rasmussen. They looked at this Michigan poll for inflation or for consumer sentiment, and then polled it and basically dissected the poll into Republicans and Democrats, and that was a total joke. So basically, after Trump won, the Democrats completely skewed towards, oh, we are all going to die. It's going to be inflation. We are all dead. And the Republicans said, no, it's going to be perfect. There's no inflation. So it looked like, ooh, the consumer gets a little iffy. And then you basically dissect it like, no, it's just Democrats. And so I mean, this just to your point is it's a complete distorted, the panic of the day. And I think, well, of course, macro predictions are always very difficult, but I have a certain confidence when you look at the Trump White House and the administration. I mean, this is one of the smartest administrations we've ever seen in terms of competence, Besant, and then the whole Silicon Valley crowd behind it, and Elon is in there. So, who knows? But even, I mean, of course, it's true. If you have a depression or something, that's not going to be good for Tesla. But in relative terms, Tesla is just very, very well positioned, right? We see a transition out of ICE now, a really inflection point transition. We see Tesla nicely positioned, like in the middle of the field, right? If it goes down, people can downgrade to Model Ys, who before had 5 Series BMWs or something, or E-Class, and then they have the lower cost car. So I think, Tesla will win on the economics and the value for your dollar, and are in the middle of the field. So as long as we don't have some great depression situation, I mean, then we have other problems. That's why we have Bitcoin. But yeah,
the timing also, back to the original storylines that we covered today. Elon left Doge, or not left Doge, but his focus is less on Doge. Perfect timing now that we're about to launch Robotaxi. I hope that we're going to see more Elon really focus, make sure that it's done, as focused as possible to make this roll out properly. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he's doing this at the right timing. So it's going to work.
That was always going to happen. Yeah.
But no, that's what my point is that that's what Elon's perfect for, is the fires. If fire occurs, he's there. I can try to, resolve it right away, faster than normal.
Just one other real quick thing with the electricity issues in Spain and Portugal and so on. I'm guessing that Tesla's phones and Tesla Energy are going to be ringing with orders to stabilize the grids there. But Jeff, I'm curious about your thoughts on tariffs on Tesla's energy business.
Yeah, fairly. I mean, it's one of the reasons I asked that question for the earnings call. I was surprised, actually. The way it was answered on the earnings call was, yeah, there's this issue we get, with LFP cells, but we have a plan. In the Q4 earnings call in January, it was, we have a battery shortage and we're doing allocation between stationary and mobile products. In this call, when I was able to get I was happy I was able to get the question in. It was, yeah, there was an issue, and there still is an issue, but we actually have a plan now, and we feel good about it. So let's see what happens. Unmitigated, if you're putting LFP cells in, and they already have these stacked lithium tariffs, they have the fentanyl tariffs, they have the reciprocal tariffs on them. I mean, batteries, nobody even has the exact number by the day. It's gonna be somewhere between 140 and 175% tariffs. That would be an issue. So Tesla developing their own LFP in the US, and the promise was, or at least the direction was, based on the IP, that it would be cheaper than untariffed LFP from China. That's the goal of the team. So if they're able to achieve that, now it's more about what's the ramp schedule. Did they bring in enough inventory? There was an article today about Rivian. Did they bring in a bunch of inventory of LFP and cells from Samsung in Korea? So there's a lot of moving parts here. But you're right. A lot of stationary storage companies have relied on LFP for the cell solution because it brought their cost structure down. They're all in trouble. And they're racing. There's LFP solutions coming up in the US. There's a few companies, but the cost structure is very high and the ramp and the scale's not there yet.
But even in energy, it is Tesla's strength strategically, that what we should never forget, it's not about how much is Tesla in trouble because of the tariffs, but the real question is how much relative advantage or disadvantage does it have to all the competitors? And Tesla is just perfectly positioned. They have 3 major regions. They have Germany, they have Shanghai, and they have the US, where they manufacture in the gigafactories a very small set of products, whereas everyone else has spread all over the globe. And if they have manufacturing sites everywhere, then they manufacture one singular thing in Korea and then export it everywhere. So Tesla, because of this redundancy that they can manufacture basically more or less everything at each location, they are perfectly positioned for this mess, for a more protectionist, mercantilist situation. And of course they're going to suffer.
Yeah.
Exactly. And of course they are going to suffer in absolute terms, but that's not the issue. The issue is, do they suffer in relative terms? And no, they're going to beat everyone in relative terms because the rest will suffer much more. And I think that's important for shareholders.
Okay, great. Fantastic panel as always, but I cannot let you guys go without a comment about robots. We cannot do a show without talking robots. Cern, you are the bot bull. Come on, dude, say something. Teach us something.
I don't know that I have any new news from this week, but certainly our discussion with Tony Seba earlier this afternoon, I think, opened our eyes to a number of things. But certainly what he calls artificial labor is a key technology that all of humanity can benefit from. So, for Tesla, Optimus is still in the development program. It's still being developed, right? It's a little ways out. I'm excited to see how they use them in their own operations, and hopefully we get to see some of that later on this year. Although if I was Tesla, I would probably keep pretty quiet about that. There's no need for them to be too public about what they're doing. But yeah, as far as we can see, things are progressing nicely.
Thanks, Cern. So Cern and I interviewed Tony Seba. Watch out for that interview. We'll drop that this weekend. He has a book called Stellar, and it's fantastic. It's stellar, and it talks about basically a utopia of a future, right? A superabundance. There's 5 key technologies that could become basically no cost to produce energy, food, transportation, and artificial labor. And in order to do that, and intelligence, right? And in order to do that, guess who's right in center of all of that? Tesla's doing 4 out of 5 of those. So this is the future, and we're headed there right now. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate you. Thank you, Joe, for joining us once again. Cern is stepping in for Alexandra. And of course, we've got Mr. Incredible, Jeff. I know he doesn't want me to call him that anymore, but hey, I love it. I cannot stop. See you guys.
The bull part's correct.
Thanks, guys.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.